Do you remember Pon And Zi? If you grew up back in the early 2000s or late 90s and you used the internet around then, you'd probably recognize these little comics. These adorable and grim little characters were really popular on the internet back then, really flourishing in the MySpace emo scene. But where did they go? Why don't we see them anymore? And who made them? Well, in this video we'll be talking about just that. So strap in, because you're in for a whole lot of nostalgia. Pon And Zi began as a small collection of drawings done instead of algebra homework back in high school by a man named Jeff Thomas. He'd draw these little characters and comics on notes and pass them around to friends during class. Some actually found their way onto clear sleeves on the covers of notebooks. People ended up actually really liking these little comics. Said fans of his little comics actually suggested that he should submit them to be printed in the school newsletter, although he didn't. Instead, the comics were uploaded to his gallery on DeviantArt, where they technically became a webcomic towards the end of 2004. 2004 was a great year for emo. We had 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, American Idiot, I Was Born. It was great. The first comics were more muted in color and darker in theme. These comics would get pretty violent and were full of angst. Jeff started dating while he was making these comics, and the heart on these characters certainly became the most important bit of gore. At first, these characters didn't have names, and there was this unnamed green creature who, well, died. But it was when love really took root as the main theme for the comic the characters were given names and brighter colors. The characters actually utilized the 3 primary colors, being yellow, red, and blue. These colors can invoke a sense of childlike playfulness, so having that vibe alongside the violence and the creepiness was a really, really good creative decision. Pon And Zi don't have genders, or age, or race, or anything like that, so they can really just be a vessel for anyone. Unfortunately, tragedy struck when shortly after graduating from high school in 2006, Jeff's first boyfriend was killed in a car accident. He sank into a deep state of depression and began having anxiety attacks, which rendered him unable to continue at college. After seeing a therapist and slowly learning how to prevent and cope with anxiety attacks, the comic series was updated for the first time in nearly 2 years. These new comics were understandably more depressing in nature. You can tell by the more muted colors and sad themes to them. Luckily, Jeff ended up healing quite a lot, and the theme of the comic ended up becoming more positive and love-focused again. So let's take a bit of a look at these comics from where they started to where they ended. I personally adore the art style of the first few, this really muted and kind of gross-looking area. In fact, it kind of looks like these comics are taking place in the back rooms in the first few, which, I don't know, it's kind of great. These characters are undeniably adorable in every way. Even when they're grotesque and gross, there's still such a charm to them. And you can see, they ended up getting really, really sweet. One of the best ways to describe these comics and their different eras is really just sweet. Despite being a little gross and a little dark, it's sweet. It's perfectly emo. One of the most well-known and iconic parts of Pon And Zi is this classic little strip. I made you a cookie, but I eated it. Pon eated it. No more cookie. It's beautiful. It's perfect. It really is. Some of the comics really perfectly encapsulate that epic and randomness of early 2000s internet culture, and of course, the art style is one of the fundamental parts of it. You can imagine some of the comics being said by Gurr from Invader Zim, and it fits perfectly, which, honestly, if that's the case, you're doing something right. But how did these spread? And why? Well, aside from the fact that they're really adorable and charming comics, they actually had a pretty big presence on YouTube and MySpace, and other websites too. They kind of utilized the lolcat sort of humor that was really popular at the time, which helped boost them up, but something was really special about them, in that they were often featured in YouTube videos for songs, and that's actually how I learned about them. Back in good old YouTube, you could basically look up any love song or emo, like pop punk song from the time, and Pon And Zi next to it, and you'd get a video, which nowadays are so nostalgic, of the song, probably very compressed since it was like a long time ago, alongside the comic, which were always very crunchy looking, and it'd basically just be a slideshow of the comics and the music in the background, and they are beautiful. That's actually how I myself learned about Pon And Zi, all the way back in around 2008 or 9. I was like 4 or 5, but my mom was on YouTube, and she would look up these different songs that she liked and would find these Pon and Zi videos of them and watch them and show them to me. I immediately fell in love with the characters. I thought they were adorable, and they always fit so well with the songs. The two that I always watched were Hey There Delilah and I'm Yours, which, I mean, they fit perfectly. But they also fit perfectly with anything from My Chemical Romance at the time, or The Used, or Paramore, or Fall Out Boy, or Evanescence. Really, you could utilize these things in a lot of different ways. So I liked emo stuff before I even knew what emo stuff was. I'm very cool. If you were like an e-dater on MySpace in the emo scene back at the time, these are the perfect things to send to whoever you were e-dating. Send a Pon and Zi comic alongside a rawrs and you will get some epic and random nuzzles. But regardless, these comics actually continued to be uploaded up until around 2012. Over the years, the art style had changed. Not super significantly, but there was a clear difference. They ended up becoming a lot less morbid and a lot more bright and happy, which was reflecting Jeff's mental state. At first, their heads got bigger and their eyes got smaller, and then their eyes got bigger and their heads got smaller. And the comics were just, like, obnoxiously sweet and make me want to cry. Something that I find really sweet about the way that these comics ended up ending was that the progression of the characters and the themes really just kind of felt like two teenagers growing up and becoming more stable and less, like, very emotional. They start off a lot more emo and edgy and gory, and then they end in a really sweet and just genuinely wholesome way. And there's something really endearing about that. Around 2012, Jeff actually ended up making some Pon and Zi merchandise. He released stickers, a series of pins, 2 plush toys, and an art book, which is something that I personally own and have been reading off of. But for now, let's take a look at the physical items that were actually released. So now, we're actually going to be taking a look at the physical Pon and Zi merchandise. But as you may notice, it's a little bit, the camera quality, it's unique, it's kind of nostalgic. Well, yeah, this is actually my childhood camera that I'm recording on. So, I won't waste your time, let's look at some stuff. As mentioned, Jeff Thomas released a Pon and Zi art book, which is amazing. I love it so much. The quality is really nice, the print is beautiful, and it just displays pretty much all the comics and some unreleased art, information about the author, which I read earlier, a little character guide, all these different things. It's so truly, if you like Pon and Zi, you gotta get this thing. It's not even that expensive. I highly recommend it. Something else that was released alongside the book was actually some stickers. I don't really have them physically, they're kind of placed everywhere, but if you look right here, we've got Zi right here, the little cat right here. On my water bottle, I've got Pon amongst a bunch of other 2000s things, but there they are right there. There were also pins of Pon and Zi and the other characters. I have Zi. Now I've got something kind of special today, because while Pon and Zi is actually kind of back, they kind of made a somewhat official return. Not necessarily in the form of the webcomic, but in the form of some new prints that you can purchase. And I have some of those. Right here is one of them. This one's adorable, I love it. But I've got some of the smaller ones too. Basically, Jeff Thomas released 100 of each of these prints. So I'm the lucky owner. There is limited stock. I don't know if there will be much after this video. We'll see. Jeff, if you get a bunch of attention on Pon and Zi, you're very welcome. So we will now open this package right here with the appropriate tool. This is basically just an unboxing video now. Me checking out these prints right here. I haven't seen them yet, so we're doing this together. So they're cute, they're very small, and look at that. This is brand new art. I'm pretty sure this is the first Pon and Zi officially released piece of art since 2012. So that means it's been over 10 years. And now we got him back. 10 years later. It's great to see him. Next one over here. Wow, okay, I may have been the first person to actually purchase this. This is Zi crying. It's 1 out of 100. Look at that. It's beautiful. And last but certainly not least, we've got Dead Zi. This is 10 out of 100. They're dead. There's a little ghost coming out. And now when you look at these new prints, Pon and Zi are happy. If you look at this other one, there's a new one you can buy. They've got a baby. These characters can have babies. So I kind of focused on the prints that were a little more on the sadder side, because I feel like it just kind of It's more in line with the aesthetic of the other ones, but it's nice to see that they're happy now. I only bought 3. There are more available, but you guys don't watch these videos enough anymore, so I don't have the money for all of them. But I do for 3. There's a new level of kind of emotion that I have attached to these comics. You know, I loved them as a little kid, but then once I was actually, when I got into my first relationship, I used to send these, her and I used to send these back and forth all the time, and they were perfect because we were obnoxiously emo in kind of an ironic way. But now there's kind of a level of sadness involved, just times past and old memories that, you know, come with a breakup. But regardless, I still adore them. Now they just make me a little sad. But I'm honestly really excited to see Pon and Zi have an official return, even if it is just in the form of these prints. They're such lovable characters, and the designs are so classic, and there's so much nostalgia involved that, I don't know, it's great to see. I'm really happy to see it. And I hope that either I reintroduce you to these comics, or maybe I just kind of introduce a new thing that you can be into. I'm gonna guess this video's gonna get like 2,000 views, but if it gets a little more than that, then awesome. You guys remember this now. You guys are aware of what Pon and Zi is/was. So Pon and Zi ended up kind of fading into obscurity, only really being remembered in the minds of those who looked at the comics as kids, or were teenagers back in the early 2000s. Sometimes you'll see 1 or 2 comics pop up here and there, but that's about it. Jeff actually continued selling these stickers and all the merchandise, until now actually, which is awesome. Back in 2021, I actually bought the art book, a pin, and 2 stickers, and he sent me like a bunch of stickers, which was really awesome. Jeff, if you're watching this, I appreciate it. Send this to anyone that you love. Send these little comics to your boyfriend or girlfriend or they friend or whatever. Might make him smile, probably help him feel just that much more loved.